Hi there. My name is Noorani. I'm president and CEO of the National Immigration Forum, and I am thrilled to moderate this conversation between two champions of immigration reform within Congress. Our first guest is Chairwoman Zoe Lofgren. She's chair of the Immigration and Citizenship Subcommittee. And then Congressman Mike Simpson from Boise, Idaho. And I should say that Chairwoman Lofgren is from the 19th District in California, in essence, Silicon Valley, San Jose area. Two districts that could not be more different, but these are two members of Congress who have taken it upon themselves to find bipartisan solutions around immigration. So Chairwoman Lofgren, Congressman Simpson, thank you so much for joining today. Really, really appreciate this.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So first question, before we kind of get into the substance of the policy and the politics, is really a question of kind of what brings you to immigration. Why do you come to work every day and say, you know what, this is a problem that I want to fix? So Ms. Lofgren, if we could start with you, please.
Sure. I happen to think that this country has been immeasurably strengthened by immigration through the centuries. My own grandparents were immigrants, and I often think how grateful I am that my grandfather at age 16 had the nerve to come seek a better life, and then here I am today in Congress. That wouldn't have happened. You multiply that out across hundreds of thousands of people, it really is a great history for our country. And I really think that when you think about the characteristics of immigrants, risk-taking, family-oriented, entrepreneurial, patriotic, it's all the things we like to think of that are the best of America. Really, the infusion of immigrants has strengthened us immensely. And of course, when it comes to the economy, there are areas of the economy that without an immigrant workforce, we just wouldn't have the capacity to perform. And farm labor is one of those elements. And that's what brought us to work on a bipartisan basis on the Farm Worker Modernization Act, which was a great experience for me, and I think for the other members, both Democrats and Republicans, who worked together really for over a year to go through all of the details and to bring people together to compromise and to end up not just with agreement among the members, but major stakeholders, the United Farm Workers Union and the growers and the dairymen and others, all saying, yes, this is a good step forward. So it was a good process, and we ended up with a good vote. Unfortunately, the Senate has not yet moved the bill.
Congressman Simpson, what brings you to immigration?
Well, it's obvious to anybody who sits back and looks at the situation that immigration reform is something this country needs to get done. We've known that for a number of years. Unfortunately, it's one of the most perplexing problems that Congress has to deal with for some reason. And I would say that both parties, both sides, have used it as a political football over the years. And we need to stop that, and we need to actually get immigration reform done in general. But particularly the agricultural part that Zoe mentioned that we worked on for a number of years. And I have to tell you, in all honesty, none of this would have happened. None of this would have got through the House without Zoe's leadership in her subcommittee. She did a fantastic job in bringing not just the members of Congress, but the 8 of us that worked together on this bill to make sure that we got it done. And both sides had to give some. That's the nature of a compromise and trying to get the right thing done. But having grown up and worked on a farm, there were several people that worked on our farm. We had about, not we, but the farm I worked for had about 10,000 acres. We had several people that used to come up from Mexico and work on the farm during the summer. And some of them actually stayed and worked in the potato cellars in the winter and stuff. And I got to know them well. They're good people. They just want to work. They just want to improve their lives, their families' lives. And what's wrong with that? Isn't that the reason all of us came to America at some point in time? As Zoe said, we're all immigrants at one point or another in our history. And it's important that we resolve this issue and quit kicking it back and forth between parties and blaming each other and pointing fingers. I am so hopeful that we can move this bill forward. I was proud of us when we got it through the House. And there was a great deal of interest in the Senate in getting it done. But then COVID hit and everything got put on the back burner, which is unfortunate. I believe we have a great opportunity to move it in the next Congress. So that's kind of what brings me to the issue, is trying to solve a problem that has perplexed our country for a number of years.
So we're about to enter yet just another Congress of divided government, and even though it seems that the White House is going to shift hands, what are the lessons that you learned over the course of developing the Farm Worker Modernization Act over the last couple of years that need to be applied to what comes ahead? But also, what are the things that we should be thinking about differently in just a continually, very deeply polarized country and even Congress?
I think one of the things that was helpful in the Farm Worker Modernization Act was access to expertise. So we weren't talking about opinions, we're talking about facts. And so we sorted through details, and when you could see the actual facts, I mean, there were compromises made on all sides.
Yeah.
That's a necessity when it comes to legislation, but it was based on the facts and not emotion. And that was very, very helpful. And I think if you take a look at the other elements of immigration law, I mean, I recently, in preparation, I honestly thought the Senate might switch hands and we'd have an opportunity to move a bill. That may or may not be the case, but I reread every single page of the Immigration and Nationality Act and went through it. And there's things in there that don't make any sense at all anymore. I mean, we're working on a structure that was really built in 1965, and it's not serving the best interests of the United States at this point. If we would have the opportunity to go through and not on our emotions, but what does each element of the law do to well serve the interests of the United States? That would be the basis for change. Whether we'll have that chance this Congress, I can't say, because the Senate is going to be, either narrowly Republican or narrowly Democratic. We don't know which, and won't until January. But that makes it very tough for the Senate to move forward, because there are members who just object to everything. It's very difficult and frustrating for those of us on the House side.
Congressman, what about from your perspective?
I honestly believed we would get the Farm Workers Modernization Act done last year in the Senate, because as I talked to Republican members, I talked to my two senators from Idaho and other Republican senators, there was a great deal of interest in it. And they had heard good things about the bill that we had passed from all of these organizations. And I think it's important that all of this same group of, 300 different organizations that supported this, they contact the Senate, whether it's Republican or Democrat, and talk to them about how important it is. Also, kind of what Zoe said is that I believe this could be the framework for doing a grand immigration reform bill. I've always opposed, or I had in the past, doing a farm workers bill and a bill for DACA and a bill for whatever else, because I thought it took the pressure off of doing immigration reform in general. I came to realize that we're never going to get to immigration reform in general. And this, I think, could be the way that we get to getting one done. Having this passed and having it work, I think we could get a DACA bill passed. And I think there's a great opportunity to do this. And as I had mentioned earlier, I think a change in the White House might be helpful in trying to get this immigration reform done. And it appears at this time like that's what's going to happen. So it could be beneficial on this aspect of getting it done. I won't mention any names or anything.
But one of the things about the bill, which I thought was really important, was the fact that you took immigration enforcement, the future of the agricultural kind of flow of legal immigration, but then you also talked about legalization of the undocumented agricultural workforce. So give me, if you don't mind, so kind of what those conversations were like, because you're both right, and those negotiations in many ways are kind of a framework for something bigger. But how did you thread that needle? Because that's a needle that is, a lot of members have come on the business end of that needle, and you all kind of got through it really, really well. How did you find that compromise between enforcement, legal immigration, and legalization?
If I can, not Mike, but I think some members of the Republican Party, fear there's some plot, that we're going to legalize all of these undocumented people and make them citizens, and then they'll all vote Democratic. Well, that's really not, there is no plot. And so what we did in the bill, it's important for stability that people have legal permanent residence, and they're constantly looking over their shoulder, not only for the individuals, but for their employers in terms of business planning and the like. And so over a period of time, the undocumented farm workforce can get stability. And then, if they're a legal permanent resident, like other legal permanent residents, after 5 years, you can apply to become a citizen or not. You can, continue on in that process. And so, if you take a look at the history of the Reagan amnesty, less than half of the people that gained their residence went on to become U.S. citizens. And really, we're not going to force citizenship on somebody if they don't want to apply for it. That's up to them. So I think in talking through it and looking at the facts, people started saying, this is a sensible thing. It's a reasonable approach. And it was something I think we all could live with.
Yeah, I would agree with Zoe. And, it is, I came to this conclusion every time I talk to a group that is kind of anti-immigrant or is anti-illegal immigration, I guess is a better way to put it. I say to them, do you really think that if somehow we could identify the, 11 to 14 million people that are here undocumented, that we would all of a sudden deport them all? That's not going to happen. Our economy would be destroyed. So what do you do in the place of that? Well, first of all, you want to get them out of what's called out of the woodwork. Get them out in the open. Let them be able to do their jobs and not have fear of being picked up by ICE or other organizations and deported every other day. I've heard too many stories of a wife at home with her 2 kids and not knowing where their husband was after work, and then getting a call the next day that they were about to be deported down at the border and stuff. And that's just not right. We got to understand that these people are good people. They're here to do a job. They're here to work. And it's a job that, frankly, you can't fill with a lot of Americans that won't take these jobs. And so let's give them citizenship, or give them earned citizenship, which is what this is. They don't automatically get citizenship. They have to earn it. And then if you're up here working and doing your job and raising a family, and your mother dies in Mexico or Guatemala or wherever, you can go home to the funeral and not fear that you're not going to get back into the country and stuff. That's just humanity. That's what we should be doing. And so I came to that conclusion a long time ago, and I think it's becoming more and more a broad feeling. I won't say that's totally within our conference or anything. There are some, who are, just as Congresswoman Lofgren said, there are some who fear that they're just trying to make Democratic voters out of all these people. I don't think that's the case.
But I also got to say, when you
the other thing we put in the bill, and I think this is important, is I've long believed that you can't really enforce our current situation because it's dysfunctional. As Mike has just pointed out, if you were to round up and deport 11 million people, which you couldn't even logistically do, it would be a terrible blow to the economy, to communities. I mean, it would be very dysfunctional. So how do you enforce that dysfunction? You can't. But if you have a functioning system, you ought to enforce the heck out of it. And so we put E-Verify in this bill, because the way we've crafted it, people could get legal. There's a way for the existing workforce, and then there's a way to get workers in on the temporary visa in the future, and then a way to accommodate people over a very long period of time. If some people don't want to be commuters but want to become Americans, there's provisions for that. So it really works. And if it works, you ought to enforce it.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, we talk about what it would do to our economy. Let me give you just one example. In Idaho, there were 4,000 H-2A visas last year. And as you know, you have to try to make those available to American workers first. You know how many American workers took those 4,000 H-2A visas? 4 out of 4,000. That tells you how much we need these workers to come, particularly in agriculture and stuff. Otherwise, you're going to see crops in the field that don't get harvested. You're going to see cows that don't get milked, et cetera, et cetera.
And I was just going to say, in terms of the political question, this assumption that, folks who would legalize and become citizens would all become, Democrats. Well, you just have to look at last week and what happened in South Texas and South Florida in terms of the Hispanic turnout for Republicans. So I think some of that argument is slowly starting to crumble.
Yeah. Each party has to make their own case to the entire electorate on all of the issues that matter to people.
Yeah, that's right.
The truth of the thing. I'll tell you what also helped was, in addition to the members of Congress working, we had frequent conversations with stakeholders in this. Right. And so by the time it was done, when you have the Western growers here in California and the United Farm Workers that were so often at odds, both saying we're for this, it really was persuasive to people across the House of Representatives.
Yeah. And so how did you build that coalition of stakeholders? And kind of along those lines, what do you need stakeholders to do this next go around?
I would say that we ask them, we talk to them. We're not the total brains of the organization. These people are. Their organizations about what we do, how it affects their ability to operate, and so forth. And so we spend a lot of time talking to these different organizations. Our staff spent an awful lot of time talking to them and seeing what their concerns were and what their interests are, and seeing where we could draw that line. A compromise means that you don't get everything you want. Sometimes you give up some things to get things you do want, and both sides do that. I could have gone out and pointed out things in this bill that said, oh, that's just not right or whatever, but it's a compromise, and that's how it works. And every successful program that's been done in Congress over the last 200 years, if it's successful, it's been a bipartisan effort. This was truly a bipartisan effort. And then you got both sides invested in it and making sure it works. And I just think for the stakeholders, if we reintroduce this bill or one similar to it, but we've got to reintroduce an Ag Workers Modernization Act, I think at the first of Congress or shortly thereafter, they need to be talking both to the new members of Congress that come in and to others, but particularly in the Senate. Because I think we'll actually, as I think I told Zoe, that we'll get more Republican votes, I believe, this time than we did last time if we introduce the same bill.
I am hopeful that we will introduce this bill or some close variation to it. We also passed a DREAM Act, and we got some Republican support on that. That's also pending in the Senate. But we also passed a bill, and this is overwhelming support in the House of Representatives for per country, some relief on per country caps, which is really a mess right now. And, that's why I'm cautious about the Senate. There were plenty of senators who were for it, and they were working, Republicans and Democrats together. And as soon as they put something together, then one member would object. So then they deal with that member, and then a different member would object, and nothing ever happened. It was like whack-a-mole, and we never could get the bill moved forward. And I think, what did we get? 350 votes or something like that in the House. So the Senate is not a highly functional organization, and it's making me worry about how they're going to get something done.
Whack-a-mole is a pretty good description of how things operate in the Senate. They give each individual senator, frankly, too much power to be able to kill something.
This has taken a completely different turn.
Yeah, it has. But that's one of the challenges with getting something through the Senate. And I don't know, maybe Zoe has an opinion of this. I don't know whether it would be better to team a DREAM Act dealing with the DACA kids with this ag bill, or to keep them separate, or what? I don't know which would be best politically trying to get it through.
I don't know. I mean, what we did in this Congress was to pass them separately. And I think people were, what we all would prefer is to get everything done. But honestly, for the last quarter century, we've been trying to do a mega deal and we never
Yeah.
succeeded. So what is it? Insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. So taking big chunks of the problem and solving them, I thought, well, let's try that. And we did actually get House votes, but we still didn't get Senate votes. So it's very frustrating.
So what does COVID-19 do to the immigration debate? Because I can sit here and make an argument that 40% of those in kind of the food production industry are immigrants. Does that help or hurt in terms of really trying to persuade the public, whether it's your districts, your colleagues' districts, or like you said, even more importantly, those on the Senate side? How do we take the urgency of this crisis and help people understand, the folks getting food to your table are more likely than not immigrants. So let's stabilize their lives. Does that provide an opening here?
Well, I don't know. We had a hearing in the Immigration Subcommittee on essential workers and what role is that playing in COVID-19, this exact subject. And my thought was, well, let's highlight the role that immigrants are playing in getting through this pandemic, in the food industry, in the ag industry, and also we are highly dependent on foreign medical services, especially in the central part of the country. Tom McClintock, who is a member of the subcommittee, really kind of blew up and said, how shameful it was to suggest that, quote, illegal immigrants should be, rewarded when Americans, had unemployment. It's like, well, that's a mismatch because we're still not seeing anybody from San Jose who lost their tech job going down to Salinas to pick lettuce. I mean, it's just not happening, and it's not going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah, I actually don't know whether the COVID-19 outbreak and the results of that will have that much of a difference. You're correct that a lot of our food service industry and those people working in processing facilities and so forth, I mean, I've talked to an awful lot of them, and they've had some outbreaks, and especially in meat packing plants and a few things like that, are immigrants. And so it's, but I don't know how much that plays. My biggest concern is that it's kind of an excuse for Congress not to do anything. That's why I don't think we got it through the Senate last year more than anything. I thought when we sent our bill over to the Senate, they were going to take it up, and I had some pretty good assurances they were going to. And yeah, they'd probably make a change or two in it. Senate always has to perfect a House bill. And so I thought they might make a change or two. And I kept telling them, listen, you cannot make dramatic changes that force the House to vote against it. If you want to make technical small change or something like that, if we can get agreement, fine. But I thought we were going to get there. But then everything we were doing was put on the back burner because of COVID. So I think that's the biggest impact of COVID is trying to get us to do our job.
So do you think in the time ahead that it's going to be even harder for you to convince your colleagues to compromise? Because it takes an incredible level of courage to say, you know what, I'm going to compromise with those across the aisle, which then means I'm probably going to have to do more work in my next primary election, my next general election. So do you think that's going to be harder moving forward to convince your colleagues to compromise?
Well, I'll say it this way. Compromise is the art of politics. It's how you get anything done. And if you're unwilling to compromise, then you might as well not be here. Now, I got to admit that my far right in Idaho says, well, he's just a compromiser. Well, yeah, but I get things done, and I get them done in the direction I want to go. That's the idea. But you have to give up some things. And I don't know. I'm an eternal optimist. And I believe that we're going to come out of this, what I'll call a dark period over the last 10, 12 years, where it seems we just get more and more partisan and get back to Congress doing its job. I will fight for those principles I believe in, just as Congresswoman Lofgren will fight for those principles too. But in the end, you have to get down and get together and work things out. I've often said in some of my speeches, I said, Nancy Pelosi and I are really pretty good friends. We can talk to each other on the floor and get along. We don't vote alike. But if I ran in her district, I'd get about 5% of the vote. And if she ran in mine, she'd get about 5% of the vote. But yet people in both our districts expect us, once elected, to get together and try to solve problems. And that's why I'm here, and that's why Zoe's here, and that's why all of us should be here.
I'll just say this. I mean, I was talking to someone on a Democratic member on the phone just the other day and mentioning the Farm Work Modernization Act and the DREAM Act and some other things. And this person said, well, I want to do it all. And I said, well, so do I. But, you know, if we can only do like half would be better than nothing, right? We've got nothing for 25 years. Yeah. And the person said, yeah, I guess that's right. So that's what I've got to deal with in the Democratic caucus. You know, there's a sense not to do just some of it unless we can do all of it. But that is a path to failure, really. The last quarter century shows that. I'm hopeful. I'm a believer that if you can get one thing done, then it shows you can get other things done. Yep. You know, if you can sit down and work through on a factual basis what's going to be better for the United States, and then come up with a piece of legislation to do that, then you can do that in other areas. I mean, I've put together a startup visa bill. I would think we could get some bipartisan support for that. I mean, we've got people coming out with postdoctoral degrees ready to start businesses that are going to employ Americans, and they can't do it here. They have to go to Canada. How's that good for the United States? You know, so we could work through issue by issue. How does it benefit the United States that US citizens who are married to someone from another country have to be separated from them for 10 years? How does that benefit the United States of America?
Yeah. Well, and just as Zoe said, and I said earlier in this, you know, I was at one time, I was like that member that she was talking to. I thought, and I was against doing partial immigration reform in different packages because I thought that took the pressure off from doing the total immigration reform that we need. But I came to the realization we're not going to get there to a total immigration bill, because every time you add something to it, it just adds a little opposition here and a little opposition there until finally you can't get it done. So this, I think, is this ag workers immigration reform bill, I think, is the key to being able to get some of the other things done in immigration reform that we need to get done.
And so I think you both answered this question in one way or another, but I just want to ask it very explicitly. So what gives you hope in the future for immigration reform?
Well, I do think that the incoming President-elect Biden, will have a very different approach to immigration than his predecessor. And there are a lot of things administratively that have been done that I thought were, you know, mistaken. And some of those things will be reversed. And additionally, there are things that can be done to improve the situation, not just reverse mistakes that were made. So that gives me some hope. In terms of legislation, frankly, it's guys like Mike who will sit down in an honest way and sort through issues. How can we get to a better place that will be best for the United States? And I think if you just look, as I said, as I recently did, go through every page of the Immigration and Nationality Act and say, how does this make our country better? How does this serve the United States? And there's a lot that needs to be changed.
What gives me hope is the American people and the fundamental fairness of the American people. But I do believe what Winston Churchill said is that, you know, America could always be counted on to do the right thing after we've tried everything else. We've pretty much tried everything else with immigration, and now we'll do the right thing. I firmly believe that.
Well, I really, really want to thank both of you for the time. And on behalf of the National Immigration Forum, we're just so thrilled to be honoring both yourself, Chairwoman Zoe Lofgren of the Immigration and Citizenship Subcommittee, and yourself, Congressman Simpson, as the winners of our Courage to Lead award this year. Every year, we choose a Republican and Democrat who have worked together, who have taken that courageous step to go through the details, to find that compromise, and to try to encourage your colleagues to do the same. So we just really want to thank you for your leadership. I want to thank you for your time. And I also just want to thank you for just two incredible sets of staff who are just a real joy to work with and experts in their own field. So thank you very, very much. We look forward to seeing you again. And of course, if we were in person, I'd be handing you a plaque of some sort. I would probably drop it on my toe. It'd be very awkward. But short of that, I just want to say thank you.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Congratulations, Mike. Well deserved.
Well, as I said earlier, none of this would have happened without Zoe's leadership on this. She's been tremendous to work with, and we appreciate it very much. But it's not done yet, as we've said in this. We've got work to do, and I look forward to working with all of the organizations to make sure we get this across the finish line.
Me too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.